Welcome to the Marketing Millennials, the No BS Marketing Podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and join me for unfiltered conversations with the brains behind marketing's coolest companies. The one request I tell our guests, stories or it didn't happen. Get ready to turn the up. Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Millennials podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sarah McConnell, VP of Demand Gen at Qualified, to talk about one of the hottest topics in B2B marketing right now, AI SDRs. We chatted about how AI SDRs can help you cut costs and increase in conversion rates, some of the coolest and most creative use cases for AI SDRs, and the big question, will AI SDRs replace traditional SDRs? If you're curious about the future of sales and marketing, this episode is packed with insights that you do not want to miss. Let's dive into the episode right now. What is up, Sarah? Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm super excited to be here.
And for everybody listening, I can confirm we're talking about AI SDRs. Sarah is not an AI SDR, but we are going to talk about AI SDRs today. So
correct.
But let's just set the stage, start with the basics. What are exactly our AI SDRs and how are they changing the game for B2B marketers?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to start with is the term SDR in general, like take AI out of the equation, is already a little conflated. You've been in marketing a long time, Daniel. You know this. When we say SDR or sales development rep, that term can span a lot of different things. I think traditionally a SDR was someone who worked inbound leads. Sales development rep, it was like the first role that you took at a company. They were the people who would take event leads or, demo requests filled out forms on your website. That was a sales development rep. But then there's also what we like to call sometimes BDRs or business development reps, which are your outbounders. They're aligned to AEs and territories, and they're going after cold accounts and trying to warm them up. However, over time, that term has just become like mashed into one at a lot of companies because the role has changed a lot at companies. So you might see SDRs at companies that do both inbound and outbound, or they might do just one or the other. So for context, when you hear the term AI SDR, it could mean a little bit of both. It could mean inbound and it could be outbound. So when we talk about how is it going to change the game for marketers, if that AI SDR can help marketing work, just like I kind of said earlier, inbound leads that are like demo requests are coming to your website or they attended an event and you need to nurture them, they downloaded content. Those are all things that marketing has to own right now that typically they kind of have to toss over the fence to a human SDR and hope that they're going to say the right thing and follow up with the right messaging that potentially AI SDRs can now do for marketers instead.
Yeah, I think that's a good definition. And I've been in multiple companies where that term is conflated because I've also been in where there was SDRs, BDRs, MDRs, XDRs, and it's hard to conflate. MDRs were doing one thing, XDRs were doing another thing, and
you can't even remember, and you work there. Yeah. We called them OSRs and ISRs and QSRs. I'm like, I don't even know what these people do anymore.
I also, going in deeper in this, the way people buy in 2025 is extremely different than 2015 and stuff like that. Also, the way people used to buy in 2015 is they were very heavily reliant on using the company for research or using a third-party tool like G2, Gartner, whatever.
Yep.
Now, most people are coming to the site just for questions about the product because the research is already done. So how would it be implemented in the funnel, basically?
Yeah, that's a really good question because you're totally right that from all the research we've seen, buyers do buy very differently. It's like 80% stay anonymous until they are ready to buy. But as part of that anonymous research is they do want to ask questions and learn more, whether that's from trusted sources like communities or peers, or they want to come to your website and they want to anonymously poke around and find answers, which is why we spend so much time and effort as marketers on providing good content on our website. An AI SDR should be able to answer questions about your product and its benefits and all of these things that a prospect would ask when they come to the website as they're evaluating a tool or a platform. So that's something, as a marketer that has obviously rolled out an AI SDR at my company, that was really big for us, is training a human SDR on the complexities of a tech SaaS product can be very difficult. And it takes a lot of time to get them onboarded with that knowledge. If you think about the intricacies of a product, the benefits, how do you compete with these vendors? What should you say here? That takes a lot of onboarding and time. And in addition to that, again, marketing has a ton of content on their website that we've produced that we want to get in front of potential buyers. I have no expectation that a human SDR is going to remember all of that content. Like, my team has written hundreds and hundreds of blog posts. No human's going to remember that. So one of the benefits of having an AI SDR that can work on your website is they can answer those questions instantaneously. So to a better buyer experience, if I come to your website and I'm curious about how you compete with someone, or I want to know how you integrate with another product, I can just ask those questions and get instantaneous answers without ever having to engage with another person and give up my information. And then you're going to call me all the time and you're going to email me. I can have an AI SDR essentially do that for me. In addition to that, I can ask for, content recommendations, and they can surface content as part of that and say, hey, here's something you might be interested in based on the questions that you're asking. What I found from doing my own rollout is that's not something I would ever expect a human SDR to honestly waste their time doing, to go search our database and go find a blog post from 10 years ago and share it. They're not going to do that. So I think the ability for AI to, one, traverse databases of hundreds of thousands of data points, there's no limit on the data that they can analyze and utilize, and then being able to then turn that around and answer questions in a natural language type of way is something that buyers are just going to get more and more accustomed to. So I think marketers adopting it early are going to be ahead of the curve.
A lot of AI just needs to be trained on your stuff as well. So having that control of, hey, these are the posts that are our top blog posts. These are the top content. Here are internal stuff that we don't share usually, but an AI SDR will do. But also, I think a thing that marketers have struggled in the past is they're measured on opportunities, but they don't have full control of converting things to opportunities. So
totally.
They really have control over half of what they're really gold on, or actually probably a third on what they're gold on. Because if revenue is involved too, then you have two spots in the funnel that are. So how would it fill a gap for more control for marketers in the pipeline?
Also, great question. Because if you think about there's 3 or 4 metrics that I usually hear marketers in B2B say they're going to be gold against. Leads created, which is great. Some companies are going to look at just a volume of leads that you've generated. It's a good metric to track, but it's a hard metric to be totally measured on, because leads doesn't tell you, are they good or are they bad? Then there was the term MQL, or marketing qualified lead, which has been in the industry for a really long time. It was a byproduct essentially for SDRs. As this conversation, we're talking about both AI SDRs and human SDRs. Marketers created MQLs as a measurement because we're saying, okay, these are marketing qualified leads. We've done some sort of analysis, scoring system, whatever it might be, and said, these leads meet a certain threshold where I think it's worth a human working. And the reason we had to do that is SDRs have limited capacity. As humans, you can only work so many leads at one time to do your job well. So we had to create MQLs to give some sort of threshold for them and not just hand over a deluge of leads and say, go work all of them. But then the second metrics, or the other 2 metrics we talk about, are pipeline and revenue. Well, in the traditional funnel that I just talked about, if marketer's in charge of leads and MQLs and then tosses them over a fence to a sales team and says, okay, now please go finish working these, they've shown marketing that they're a great lead. They fit every ICP that, parameter that we have. They've shown a ton of interest. They've watched all the stuff on our website. I now have to cross my fingers and hope that the SDRs or the AEs or whoever's working them, the BDRs, whatever the acronym is for them, is actually working them and turning them into opportunities. So with the current setup that we have, it can be really hard as a marketer to be gold on pipeline, because you sort of lose control of when pipeline is created at that handover from marketing to sales with that MQL or leads or whatever you do to hand them over. Now, an AI SDR, on the other hand, can be owned completely by marketing. You're going to train it on your content. You're going to give it goals and say, here's who I want you working. Here's who I want you booking meetings with. Here's what I want you to say to them. Here's the event leads I want you working. There's no limitation on how many leads that they can work. So there's no reason for your marketing team to put any gates in place like MQLs before handing these leads over to that AI SDR to go work. And now suddenly I feel like I have a lot more control of pipeline because I can control, again, what that person is saying or the AI SDR is saying. I can control all the leads that they're working. I never have to worry about any capacity limitations. And I've found, as someone who owns a pipeline number, that is just a breath of relief because, again, I don't have to worry about one, handing over bad leads to sales, and then they don't like marketing because it's that like age-old sales and marketing tension where they're like, hey, you're handing me crap that I don't want to work. Or alternatively, I feel like I'm handing them great leads and then I go look at our system. I'm like, why are these all in nurtured? None of them have converted into opportunities or revenue. So it gives marketers a lot more control over the process and essentially the metrics that they're going to be held responsible to no matter what anyways.
I think an underrated problem that is hard to solve with real STRs that are just coming in, and you have this problem with the ramp and people who are ramping and they don't really fully know your brand and all that stuff, is I feel a lot of things is brand messaging and brand touch points. And as marketers, want to protect the brand, this is how we want to show ourselves to the public. And I think sometimes humans could forget that this is really important because one, they're not in marketing, and two, they have 1,000 other things to think about.
Totally.
But on the flip side, I want to ask, because there's that problem which I think AI could really solve. But then I know a worry for some people is, okay, well, branding's okay, but what about losing the human touch, the human feel?
Yep.
We're in an age of more authenticity. So how do we balance those two dilemmas as marketers, that we want these human touch, but we also want a really good brand touch point playbook?
Totally. And I think to the first point of expecting human SDRs to stay on brand messaging is very hard to do. We, at Qualified where I work, we have some of the best SDRs in the business. They're great at what they do. They know our brand really well. They use our product every single day. But still, the pace at which marketers move and the way that we tweak and edit branding and the things that we say can be very difficult for anyone that's even close to the brand to keep up with, let alone a 20-something SDR that's in sales that might report not into your team. It's really difficult for them to keep up with the expectation of messaging. And on the same point of that, even if you kept messaging the same forever and you're a large enterprise company and you don't move that fast, SDRs typically are only in seat for like 10 months. That's not a role anyone wants to stay in for a prolonged period of time. It's a stepping stone into a sales role. So you're constantly retraining them. Every time you have a new one, you have to retrain on that brand messaging. So to your point of something AI can help with, and I'm not going to just say, oh, AI is this perfect solution. It's always going to be on brand and say the right things. We all know that's not true. The difference with AI is that you have a little more control over tracking what they're saying. And then once you can edit that, so in our case, if an AI SDR says something that I didn't want them to say about our brand, I can go in and give prompts and feedback and say, hey, say it this way or change. All of these AI products you're going to work with in marketing, they're going to allow you typically to give some sort of feedback loop to the AI. Once I've trained it once, that lives on forever. I never have to retrain it if it quits or goes to a new job and gets promoted. That stays forever until I update my messaging, and I only have to do it once and retrain it. So that's the one side you asked about, Daniel, as far as like staying on brand messaging. And yes, there's a ton of benefits to using AI for scaling the ability to talk about your brand in a way that marketers want control over. But on the side of keeping that human touch, you're totally right. I can't remember the last time I opened an outbound email. It's really hard to catch people's attention. You need authenticity. And that is something we see all over the place that AI is not always very good at. So I think what we're going to end up seeing in the future from an AI and human standpoint is this is what we're doing at Qualified, is we keep our humans on the task that we know require a ton of authenticity. And for us right now, that's breaking into cold accounts. If I have cold target accounts these are like my top 100 accounts, I've worked with my go-to-market team. They're like, you got to go win these accounts. And I need to reach out to a VP there or a CMO there. I want my human SDRs or BDRs working those accounts. I want them sending really authentic messaging, doing the research, building relationships, versus if we're getting a inbound request that says, hey, I'm interested in a demo. That doesn't require a ton of authenticity. That just actually requires something to go in and book meetings and help, or asking product questions with responses, or asking questions about your brand. Those typically don't require the same level of like human touch or authenticity that something like cold outbounding, in my opinion, does, or like an AE or a sales rep. Right now, I think sales will always stay with a human because that requires such deep relationship building. So anyways, the long-winded answer I think of that is we'll start to find a way to fit AI into roles that, one, have high turnover and don't have people that want to stay in them for very long, and then also have a ton of repetitiveness to them where they're doing the same thing over and over. Think responding to demo requests, following up with event leads, trying to book meetings, very repetitive, very redundant. AI can help with that. But when you look at your organization and you look at where you need that human touch, I don't think AI is going to necessarily replace any of that. What it's going to do is it's going to co-pilot it. And we hear a lot about co-pilots. We hear a lot about like assistants. It'll give recommendations. It's going to tell you who to focus your time on, but it isn't doing that full task. It's just kind of writing co-pilot with the human who's going to bring that like human element to that messaging.
Well, it also sounds like SDRs are going back to what the original job of an SDR was to create net new pipeline from accounts, where we got into the stage where there's a lot of double touching of leads that marketing is already working, and we were just doing. It also forces marketing to do demand gen, which a lot of marketing started turning about just capturing things through Google or bottom of funnel leads that were probably already going to convert to ready. So now marketing is forced to, which is a good thing, I think, to start doing more prospecting with Meta and whatever platform they're using for the ad platform, which I think is a good thing, and let human SDRs do what they were doing, and then AI SDRs helping the tasks that are monotonous or forgotten or humans have hard to remember. But I also want to add one question, because I don't think we actually got into this. What tasks are AI SDRs supposed to be doing versus human? What are the task breakdown?
Yeah. And I would say one, the not as clean answer is depends on your organization and what you need, because they're pretty flexible. I would say what we see right now where they excel, and I kind of mentioned it's like repetitive tasks. So things like talking to website visitors, that's a big one. We talked about it earlier, Daniel. If they come to the website, they've got product questions, but they're not ready to book yet. That's not something you typically want to waste a human SDR's time on, because if they're bonused, typically they're commissioned on meetings booked. Wasting time with tire kickers on the website, not really super interesting to them. That's a repetitive task that AI can help take over. Responding to demo requests, or, I want to book a meeting, whatever it is, helping book meetings for inbound prospects, super easy, super scalable, very repetitive. Qualifying visitors. So if you think about an SDR, typically they're going to have to ask a few questions to make sure, one, you match our ICP, and two, you have some sort of buying interest. So if I book the meeting and I hand it over to an AE, it's actually worth their time. That's something that AI is going to be able to do over and over again. And then I think we already talked about this one, but being able to answer questions and provide content, being able to, traverse a database and understand how your company works and what you want to say, and being able to surface that content and answer questions is a very repetitive and not fun process that AI SDRs are going to be able to do. And I actually recently on my LinkedIn was showing some different metrics that we measure AI SDRs on at our company that are not your typical metrics of like meetings booked or whatever it is. And one of them is disqualified sales conversations. And again, to the repetitive tasks that a human SDR does not want to waste their time on, is if you have a website visitor that came in, they're showing some interest, they want to have a conversation, they want to talk, our AI SDR was able to disqualify, it was almost 100, like in a month, was able to disqualify like 100 something potential sales conversations. That I think was like 94 was the exact number. But they're able to disqualify those for a number of reasons, whether they don't fit ICP, they're not showing the right buying intent, or they don't have the right tools that we need, whatever it might be. Those are repetitive tasks that a human would have had to do before. And if a human wasn't doing them and it was just behind a form, then it was an AE's problem to then go disqualify them, that you can now have AI just do for you. So I think, to your point, it's freeing up a lot of time for humans to do the tasks that need that human touch that they're kind of wanting to do anyways, going back to it. And we can let AI handle some of those more monotonous things like qualification, meeting booking, event lead follow-up. Those are the things that they don't really want to do anyways, frankly.
I also, I mean, going a little deeper on the disqualification process, one area I see that this could really have a lift or gets potential squeeze of pipeline is a lot of forms DQ a lot of people up front, and there's a lot of mistakes that humans make to DQ. So having an AIS year go after DQs to confirm if they actually disqualified.
Totally.
That's one. And then I think one thing we used to do in my old company is we had ICP and then like ACP, which was like acceptable customer profile, but we didn't want generally SDRs to have to touch the acceptable unless we had to create basically a whole team to go after acceptable ones. We just called it a tiger team that just went after acceptable people. But now I feel like an AI SDR could at least get to the root of what they're wanting before a human comes to touch those two places.
Before my role at Qualified, I was working in cybersecurity marketing, which is very, very different than working for MarTech. And one of the things that we required, to your point of form fills, was we had a pretty strict, ICP of who we could sell our product to. And not only that, we had pretty strict routing rules in cybersecurity because you have we called it SLED. It was like government, education. They went to specific AEs that specialized in government agencies or education because there's so many more strict regulations around them. So the number of form fields that I had to have on a form, I was our digital marketer there, would drive me nuts. And I constantly was butting heads with our sales team because I'm like, I don't want to put all these form fields on a form because people drop off and they don't want to answer all these questions. If someone is showing interest and wants to buy our product, I would much rather, of course, as a marketer that's bonused on leads, MQLs, and pipeline, I'm like, let them fill out a form. It takes the human a little bit of time to disqualify them. Who cares? But the sales team's like, no, I don't want my sales team to work all these garbage leads that they don't think are ready to buy. And then they are, who do we route them to? We've got to do all this manual human labor to route them appropriately. So it fell on marketing to put it in form fields. Now, an AI SDR, you don't need all that. They can kind of, one, ask it in a more natural way. And two, to your point, Daniel, they can follow up with any leads that come into your site and make sure they are qualified. No human has to do that. No human has to send the email, hey, Daniel, just checking. Do you use this? Do you have this? What's your industry? They can do all of that instantaneously and at scale. And the second one of that is event leads. We do a ton of events in B2B, and giving an event lead list to your SDRs, they're always like, not again. Thousands of leads that I have to go work. I don't know anything about them. Are they cold? Are they hot? Do they have interest? And as a marketer, I get it. I'm like, I don't know, but I did pay 30 grand to get this lead list. So I definitely need you to go work it so I can prove it was worth it. I can give that to an AI SDR now and they can work every single lead. Doesn't matter. And you know what? If there weren't a ton of opportunities in there, that's fine. I did not just waste hours and hours and hours of a human's time following up with those leads. So those are the two use cases that I think I get a ton of excitement about for AI SDRs is the qualification and following up with a massive amount of leads from something like event follow-up.
One question I think I could see another use case for AI SDRs, but I also want to ask you how marketing or sales can help this process. One thing I feel like AI SDRs could do is become a good source of collecting first-party data and doing market research on people who are just browsing. So I think
Yep.
that's one. But how can teams internally help, like, even any AI they're using, but how can they use it? Because I feel like to make an AI more authentic, the way to do it is feed it more data that isn't
hmm
collected through forms and through data providers or enrichment providers. So how could we as marketers or we as salespeople collect better first party data to make these touches more personalized?
Yeah, you hit one already, which is first party data. If it lives on your website, AI SDRs can understand like what are you looking at? What pages have you shown interest in? Like what products are you showing interest in? Stuff like first party intent data that can be collected over time. And then an AI SDR can again aggregate and analyze in the blink of an eye is incredibly helpful. The other thing that I think is important is AI brings in this opportunity for like a feedback loop. And one of the examples I'll give as a use case that we use quite frequently here is when you think about data and how you can make your AI SDR better or any AI that you're using as a marketer. I'm going to use the AI SDR as an example, obviously, since that's what we're chatting about. But people come, they ask questions, they're showing what they're interested in because they're having this conversation with this AI SDR. If you can aggregate those questions and you can do an analysis on them, and the product should be able to do this for you and tell you the questions you're getting as a company, I use it as a feedback loop internally to say, oh, shoot, I don't have any content about this topic that these people keep asking about. So my ASDR can't even, it can answer it, but it's not able to share like links or like, obviously the market doesn't understand this yet because we're getting a ton of people asking questions. I, as a demand gen marketer, can then go to my team and say, there is an obvious need for us to create more content and do more demand gen around this topic because I can see from this analysis from the AI SDR and what it's collecting that there's a lot of misunderstanding in the marketplace. And then I can create that content and then feed that back to the AI who can now answer those questions better and have links to share. So I think that feedback loop and being able to look at like what the analysis is of what's being asked can really help us be better marketers and create better content and make sure that our prospects are getting the answers that they want and that we are saying the right things out in market. So that's something that I've found that being able to create the content and then give it back to the AI and let it be trained on can be really helpful for making sure those conversations are relevant.
So for people who are skeptical, they don't want to adopt AI, they think it might be not human touch. What are some real results you could share that could help prove that, hey, this is at least worth a test, it's worth something you should try for your funnel, it could do X, Y, and Z? What are some examples you could share that are cool that marketers could adopt today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I will say as far as skepticism, totally normal. Like it's new. This is a massive shift in our industry, and having skepticism of handing something over like pipeline to AI can feel very daunting. One of the recommendations that I give, because it's something that I did personally when we rolled ours out, is it's not like opening up a fire hose and just letting it run like in this massive stream. You can do it in phased approaches in a way that will give you confidence. So, like in our case, we started with things like off hour coverage. I don't have SDRs that are working 24 hours a day. If you can start to test it off hours, see what it's saying, see if the messaging is right, start to learn like what you need to do can be really helpful. And then slowly opening up the gates a little bit more like, okay, now I'm going to let it talk to everyone and work all these leads other than my top 1,000 target accounts. And then once you have a level of comfortability where you're like, okay, I am ready to let this talk to everyone, then you can open up those floodgates and say like, okay, we're going to let this work every single lead because we know that it's saying the right things and I have the confidence that I need. So one, if you have skepticism, totally normal. You're right to have skepticism. Just know that it's not a 0 or 100 thing, that you can do it in a phased way that builds confidence for you, for your executive team, so you can start to collect data to prove value. So that is one answer. As far as like results go, one, if you go to our website, qualified.com, we have a ton of customer stories talking about AI SDRs and the success that they've had. So if you're ever curious, you don't believe me, you can always go there and look. I would say the main success stories that we get from customers are one, never missing an opportunity on their website. So we'll have customers come to us and say like, hey, before we did this, we had thousands and thousands of missed chats, people coming to our website. Our SDRs weren't available to have the conversation. We've never missed one since we rolled out an AI SDR. So that's one. The second is just meetings booked in pipeline. We had a customer called Sin7. They were talking about they were able to increase the meetings booked from website visitors. So, when they're coming to the website, they're having a conversation, they were filling out a form, whatever it might be, their conversion rate from visitor to meeting booked, they were able to increase because they were able to cover the entirety of their website visitors. So usually meeting book increases and no missed chat conversations, being able to work all of those leads, those are the results you're going to see. And again, if you want to see like actual numbers or anything, if you go to our website and look at customer stories, there's tons of them there that I would encourage people to go look at.
I always say, really marketing, there's really two levers you could pull. And in those levers, there are nuances that you could pull. So the two levers is you could pull and open up the floodgates and let a bunch of leads in. And then the other lever is in helping increase conversion rates. Those are the two levers really you could pull at the simplest level. There's nuanced in what channels you use, but this seems like, which is a lot of the leaky funnel, all these things you hear about where you want to push a metric up like, hey, I need my meeting book rate is on website leads are X and I want to increase it by 5 to 10%. That's a huge lever that marketers could pull. You want to, your sales rep are working really DQ'd leads. Like let's get rid of those and give them more time to work qualified leads. So you see opportunity books go up. You really can use this AI, and I'm not doing it to pitch because when I was in marketing ops, my goals were always like, what is the most important lever to pull and decide and how to pull that lever. And this seems like the off-hour thing is a really big problem a lot of people have. The website chats are really big. Also, SEOs are really not that good at feeding the right article at the right time to the right person, which is, I know that. So you take the things that are hard for SDRs off their plate and let them do the stuff that requires humans. I think that, but looking at your pipeline and saying, hey, these are levers I can pull to move those up, and what would that effect on my pipeline be? And usually you could look down funnel and that's actually a lot of revenue you're missing out
Totally. And the last thing I will say to that too is, as we were talking about this and we're saying, okay, if an AI SDR suddenly takes away the need to track things like MQLs, which there's still a good number of marketers out there that are tracked on MQLs. And Dana, you're in marketing ops, so you know this. Typically, when you look at a conversion funnel and you're looking for a leaky part of that funnel, you look at things like visitors to leads, to MQLs, to SALs, to opportunity, like you have that full funnel. And to understand what levers to turn, you still, you're like, well, I need those numbers. So how do I, as marketers, like step back from that MQL number in my funnel? And I was going back and forth with our team and I was like, what gets me excited about this from a demand gen perspective is it allows me to go back, you said it a little while ago, Daniel, to doing like actual demand gen. I no longer have to like my activities aren't driven by needing to like shove MQLs at my sales team and them saying like, I missed my number. So I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things I can go do. I can change my scoring system or I can do these activities to skew those numbers. Now, if we introduce something like AI into that funnel, I can still track all those things. Those metrics are still there and still reliable. But what got me excited is I was like, I can go do demand gen, like true demand gen out in market that drives interest in our product, that drives more brand awareness, that's driving more website visitors. And now I'm like, hey, because AI is working at all hours of the day, it's qualifying all of these visitors. I'm not missing any chats. I'm not missing booked meetings. Instead of having to focus on like little small things, which I'm still going to do, because let's be honest, it's marketing and we're in demand and that's just kind of part of the job. But it opens me up to be able to do some more like bigger things from a demand gen perspective to try to drive up website traffic, because I know that's what's going to fuel that funnel now versus doing smaller, maybe less brand efficient things to try to drive up numbers like MQLs. So anyways, that's just something that I keep thinking about of like, man, this just lets me do a lot more creative things to drive people to my website. Once I know my AI SDR is going to work all of those website visitors.
Yeah, because you can easily say, okay, branded Google search goes straight to human because you know that they searched your name, they know who you are. You could easily say, say Google is a channel that I know converts really high, pass that to an SDR. Facebook,
100%.
Meta is a very prospecting top of funnel tool. Maybe key accounts and people who filled out the form perfectly go to SDR. The rest, let's get AI SDR to qualify more. Now you can do it also channel based, which a lot of problems is like, I remember SDRs getting so excited to just get Google leads because know Google leads are the best leads.
Like
it's just
perfect.
It's perfect because they search your name. They know who you are. It's not a hard conversation. So it just takes, you could start feeding the leads that should have already been fast tracked to an SDR already and let true intent happen and then pass it to the SDR.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
Lastly, I want to ask you a couple just like rapid fire questions about this. What is the biggest advantage from AI SDR over traditional SDRs?
I think fast answer, scalability. There's no limitations. There's no capacities. You can scale infinitely.
If you would have one word to describe an AI SDR, what would it be?
Infinite.
I love that. What's one of the most creative ways you've seen AI SDRs be used?
Oh my gosh, this is a fun one. Creative. I think a creative one, because we talked about ads, being able to speak to ad click-throughs. So if they came to the website and they had clicked like a branded ad or they'd clicked a competitive ad or whatever it is, the AI SDRs can ingest that information and say, hey, it looks like you were Googling this, and being able to like really reference very specifically like ads that they clicked on or things that they've done or emails they've clicked through. Those are things that are, in my mind, it's not super creative, but it is very personalized. That would take a human a lot of time to like analyze and be able to say that they can do like instantaneously. So creative and interested.
What's the biggest mistake companies make when implementing AI SDRs?
Not training it, not giving it the right content, and just hoping it'll work.
Or what is a dream feature you have for the like next gen of AI SDR?
Being able to do handoffs to other AI agents as more agents get bigger. So think like handing off to customer success agents, things like that.
AI SDRs, is it a cost-saving tool or revenue-generating machine?
I think the answer is both. It's both cost-saving and it'll drive more revenue.
And last question I ask everybody on this podcast is, what is a marketing hill you would die on?
A marketing hill I would die on is that marketers shouldn't be measured on MQLs. And that was well before AI SDRs. Like years and years before AI SDRs were introduced, is that MQLs are not the right metric for marketers to be measured successfully on.
I mean, I 100% agree on that because marketers could game that easily.
I've done it.
Yeah. Every marketer, I mean, content syndication, like.
I'm like, suddenly you got 5 more points. You've MQL'd. Yay.
Yeah. Suddenly we took off a form field and it's less qualified, but it works.
Perfect. But I hit my number.
Exactly. Lastly, where can people find you and what you're doing?
Qualified.com. So if you want to check out an AI SDR in action, we have one called Piper. She is on our website. If you want to check it out, go to qualified.com, have a conversation. Also, if you ever have questions, find me on LinkedIn. I love chatting with other marketers. So if you ever want to pick my brain or test me on anything AI SDR, come find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat.
Well, thank you so much for joining. And I'm excited to see the next generation. I mean, I left marketing ops just before this was happening. So I'm sad that I don't get to implement a feature like this and then get credit for increasing pipeline. But it's okay. It's okay. But thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Keep tuning in to hear more great insights from the coolest marketers from around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the Marketing Millennials podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. It helps bring more marketers into our community.